Badlands, running to Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Mira esta mierda, explotaron allá toda esta mierda, porque no está explotando.
Mierda, marico, se prendió el peo en esta mierda, yo.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Geopolitics with Ghost. I'm your host. I was your host, Gordon McCormick, a.k.a. the Ghost of Base Patrick Henry. Welcome, everybody, to the show. I'm back from my classified trip to the Caribbean Sea. I obviously missed some pretty important stuff, but have been tracking it and caught up on it. And yeah, man. What a hilarious and interesting week of geopolitics for me to have missed. So apologies for not being here to cover it live. That would have been fun. But I have had a chance to really wrap my arms around it. And it is every bit as interesting and as hilarious as I really hoped it was going to be. How is the chat doing? Yeah, looks like the chat was enjoying the week as much as I was. Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot to cover. I've done a couple shows. A lot of them have been pre-recorded the past few days, so those are going to play in the next couple days. and was able to get some of my thoughts out. And we'll kind of circle back. We're going to spend probably this whole show just talking about Venezuela. We might cover a few other things if we get to it, but as you could probably realize that the Caribbean and what's happening in the Western Hemisphere is pretty important. So I think where we should start, having done this a few times now, now that I actually have the full control of the show to myself, I think I want to go to Trump. And specifically, I want to go to Trump talking about the Don Roe doctrine. Where is the Don Roe doctrine? So Trump did, let's go pull up we're going to pull up this guy. This is the press conference that Trump gave right after, like the morning of. This would have been the morning of the arrest, the capture. And what's really interesting about this is it's the what is it? The 5-year anniversary of, or I'm sorry, the 6-year anniversary of the killing of Soleimani. Soleimani was killed on January 3rd, 2020. Trump's last year in office. He even references it in this presser. But I wanted to jump forward to the part where he talks about the Don Roe.
Billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country. And we are ready to stage a second and much larger attack if.
Okay, so Trump is saying right there that he's ready to stage a second and much larger attack. I think I was listening to John on his show as we were going live, and it sounds like Trump just put out a post saying that he's not going to do the second and much larger attack, that everything looks like it's going to be on the up and up, and we're going to be all right. So we don't need to do the second attack. It's interesting that they don't have all this stuff laid out on here it is on YouTube. Sorry, I'm pulling it up on YouTube because I can actually search the transcript, which you can't do on Rumble. Maybe one day we'll get that, but here it is. So we're going to share this screen instead, and we're going to go
of the core principles.
Okay, so the Monroe Doctrine. I'm going to let Trump talk about this, and then we're going to talk about the Monroe Doctrine
of American foreign policy, dating back more than 2 centuries, and not anymore. All the way back, it dated to the Monroe Doctrines. And the Monroe Doctrine is a big deal, but we've superseded it by a real lot. They now call it the Don Roe document. I don't know. It's Monroe Doctrine. We sort of forgot about it. It was very important, but we forgot about it. We don't forget about it anymore. Under our new national security strategy, American dominance in the Western Hemisphere will never be questioned again. Won't happen. So just in concluding, for decades, other administrations have neglected or even contributed to these growing security threats in the Western Hemisphere. Under the Trump administration, we are reasserting American power in a very powerful way in our home region. And our home region is very different than it was just a short while ago. The future will be, and we did this in my first term. We had great dominance in my first term, and we have far greater dominance right now. Everyone.
Okay, so let's talk about this. This is a really, really important, I think, concept where the nuance and the details, the devil's in the details here, because I think what Trump says there is both accurate and I wouldn't say inaccurate, but he's simplifying it. I don't think anybody's forgotten about the Monroe Doctrine. I think actually it was weaponized in a really, really awful way by the neocons and used as a historical justification to do regime change operations in the Americas. I think they actually used the Monroe Doctrine to assert that and back it up. But I think what Trump is talking about doing is restoring the original intent of the Monroe Doctrine. So let's talk about what the Monroe Doctrine is. So the Monroe Doctrine, here's Wikipedia. I'm just going to read Wikipedia because it consolidates and condenses. I can fill in, I can give you the real background of all this. I don't need Wikipedia to tell me this. But the Monroe Doctrine is a United States foreign policy position that opposes any foreign interference in the Western Hemisphere, originally concerning European colonialism. Okay, remember that. European colonialism, Britain specifically. It holds that any intervention in the political affairs of the Americas by foreign powers is a potentially hostile act against the United States. The doctrine was central to American grand strategy in the 20th century. So that's where that last line is, where the neocons weaponized it in the most awful way. It continues. President James Monroe first articulated the doctrine on December 2nd, 1823, during the 7th annual State of the Union address to Congress, though it was not named after him until 1850. At the time, nearly all Spanish colonies in the Americas had either achieved or were close to independence. Monroe asserted that the New World and the Old World were to remain distinctly separate spheres of influence, and thus further efforts by European powers to control or influence sovereign states in the region will be viewed as a threat to U.S. security. In turn, the United States would recognize and not interfere with existing European colonies, nor meddle in the internal affairs of European countries. Because the U.S. lacked both a credible navy and army at the time of the doctrine's proclamation, it was largely disregarded by the colonial powers. While it was successfully enforced in part by the United Kingdom, I don't know if that's true, who used it as an opportunity to enforce its own Pax Britannica policy, the doctrine was ignored several times over the course of the 19th century, notably with the Second French intervention in Mexico. By the beginning of the 20th century, the United States itself was able to successfully enforce the doctrine, and it became seen as a defining moment in the foreign policy of the United States and one of the longest standing tenets. It has been invoked by many U.S. statesmen and several U.S. presidents, including Ulysses S. Grant, Theodore Roosevelt, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and is being substantively reinterpreted in the 2020s by Donald Trump. Okay. It says after 1898, the Monroe Doctrine was reinterpreted by lawyers and intellectuals as promoting multilateralism and non-intervention. In 1933, under President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the United States reaffirmed this new interpretation, through co-founding the Organization of American States. Into the 21st century, the doctrine continues to be variably denounced, reinstated, or reinterpreted. And it goes back to talk about the seeds of the Monroe Doctrine. And I don't know I haven't read this whole Wikipedia, so I don't know what they're going to talk about here. But there are a few things that I want to touch on, and we'll see if maybe Wikipedia mentions it at all. Okay, so here it says British foreign policy was compatible with the general objective of the Monroe Doctrine. I mean, okay, I don't know about that. Britain went as far as covertly assisting the South Americans in their fight against Spain. Britain offered to declare a joint statement concerning the doctrine, as they feared trade with the Americas would be damaged if other European powers further colonized it. In fact, for many years after the doctrine took effect, Britain, through the Royal Navy, was a sole nation enforcing it, as the United States Navy was comparatively small force. The U.S. government did not issue a joint statement due to the recent War of 1812. However, the immediate provocation was the Russian ukase of 1821, asserting rights to the Pacific Northwest and forbidding non-Russian ships from approaching the coast. The ukase of 1821 would refer to the Russian proclamation of territorial sovereignty over northwestern North America, roughly, which is present-day Alaska, Canada, and the Pacific Northwest, which Russia eventually sold to the United States. Okay, so the full document of the Monroe Doctrine was chiefly written by future President and then Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, is long and couched in diplomatic language, but its essence is expressly in two key passages. The first is the introductory statement, which asserts that the New World is no longer subject to colonization by European countries. So we don't really need to read through the rest of this, but the point that I wanted to make was the War of 1812, which is a historical event that was very significant to our history, but is almost never discussed. It's pretty much glossed over by anyone talking about history from a broad standpoint. The American Revolution is highly touted. The Civil War is highly touted. Those are roughly 90 years apart. But a lot happened in between those two wars. And namely what happened was the Constitution was written and ratified. A civil war almost happened in 1800 when Thomas Jefferson defeated John Adams in a major upset that nobody expected. It was almost bigger. I would say it probably was bigger than Trump defeating Hillary Clinton in 2016. And that event, in my opinion, precipitated the invasion by Britain in 1812, 12 years later, where they invaded D.C., burned the White House to the ground. Dolly Madison famously ran out of the White House while it was on fire, or while it was being set on fire, with the painting of George Washington. That was the one thing that she said that needed to be saved. And the reason that Britain did that is because the Federalist Party, which was backed by London, that was the first political party formed in the Americas. It startled both George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. George Washington and Jefferson both generally agreed that political parties, like formal political organizations, were a problem and a threat, although I think Thomas Jefferson came around to understand that the only way to fight fire was with fire. So he forms the Democratic Republican Party. The Democratic Republican Party, after George Washington is unanimously elected the first time around, the second time, I think he gets like 98% of the votes. These would have been among the statesmen who were in attendance to select the president. They then formalized the election system. The Federalist Party wins the election of 1796. That's John Adams. So John Adams becomes president, and then when he is running for his second term as the incumbent, that's when he's defeated by Thomas Jefferson, and nobody saw that coming. Everyone just thought it was a shoo-in that John Adams was going to continue to be president. And so Thomas Jefferson wins, and the Democratic Republicans win despite being outspent significantly by the Federalist Party, which is, again, backed by the bankers, backed by London. And the Federalists never win another election again. Thomas Jefferson wins re-election in 1804. James Madison, who actually was a Federalist throughout the 1780s and 1790s, he's the one who famously wrote the Constitution. He was the scribe who wrote the Constitution. He is the scribe who took all the notes at the Continental Congresses. Excuse me 1 minute. Sorry about that. He writes down all the notes from the Continental Congresses that are happening in the 1780s to write the Constitution. The Constitutional Conventions, rather, not the Continental Conferences, but the Constitutional Conventions. And if you actually go on, I think it's Yale Law School has it. I know other sources as well, but I know Yale for sure has it. But you can actually read his notes, and his notes were so good. He actually has like the dialogue, the back and forth of what these guys were saying to one another. And some of it's pretty vicious. These guys did not get along. The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists were not friends. Just as vicious, if not more vicious, than the Republicans and Democrats of today, like the actual two sides, not the uniparty. And James Madison then defects from the Federalist Party. He joins the Jefferson cabinet as a cabinet member, and then becomes Jefferson's protege. And then he runs as a presidential candidate for the Democratic Republican Party in 1808. He wins that election in 1808. And by this point, by the way, the British soldiers, or the British Navy, is extremely hostile towards America. To the extent that Catherine the Great, at the end of in the 1790s, again, this is after the Revolutionary War is over. Catherine the Great, the Russian czar, or czarina, she had to impose a doctrine of her own, basically saying anyone who messes with like the Russian Navy is going to enforce basically like international law. Not that the international law existed at that point, but maritime law, and make sure that ships can move around in the open sea and not be captured by foreign countries. What was happening was the British were capturing U.S. merchant ships. The U.S. really didn't have a navy to protect it. And then they were coercing all of the American sailors to join the Royal Navy. So you would be an American sailor on an American ship, just not in the military, just as like a sailor. And then you would be forced to join the British Navy and sail as in the military. And if you refused, you were thrown in prison. And again, in Britain, they could throw you in prison for the rest of your life and never charge you with anything. There was no rhyme or reason to any of it. That was one of the reasons the revolution happened. So this got really bad in the 1800s. Catherine the Great dies, and this gets really bad. It gets really, really ugly in the 1800s. During Madison's term, because he then he wins the election in 1808, and he wins the election again in 1812. And I think it was 1814. They have the Federalists then organized the Hartford Convention. This would have been during the War of 1812. And the Hartford Convention was they met in Hartford, Connecticut, and the Federalists all plotted. These are the guys, by the way, the Federalists were the guys who were calling for the strong central federal government. They thought the state governments were unreliable. They didn't like the idea of every state issuing its own currency. They wanted a strong national bank. They wanted a strong centralized government. But that's because in their mind, they were going to be the ones in charge of the government. When they lost control of the government, they didn't like that idea so much. And they actually started expressing that they thought the federal government had too much power. They thought that there was too much control. And the anti-federalists, who were then at that point the Democratic Republicans, they were like, well, yeah, this is exactly why we said we shouldn't have a centralized government. But, it's too late. We already codified it into the Constitution. So it is what it is. So the Hartford Convention, the Federalists are plotting to secede, to organize the Federalist states. I think there were 4 or 5 of them at least. They were going to secede from the Union. They were going to join the British side. And they were going to basically lead start a civil war in America against the American government. Throughout this entire process, the anti-federalists, the Democratic Republicans, are accusing the Federalists of being traitors. They're accusing them of being in bed with the British. The Hartford Convention all but just confirms that. And so when the British do finally surrender in 1815 and the war ends, it's important to understand the War of 1812 was a continuation of 1776. Yorktown was effectively an armistice. It was effectively a ceasefire. But in the eyes of the British, they never lost their colonies, not yet at least. And so in 1815, when the War of 1812 ends, that's when James Madison abolishes the Federalist Party. The Federalist as a political party, the Federalist Party ceases to exist. And that's because it was widely understood that it was a party of traitors who had gotten in bed with the British and were trying to overthrow the U.S. government and install themselves as tyrants over the American continent. So with that context, this is again 1815. So now we fast forward a few years forward to, I believe it's 1823. So 8 years later, that is when James Monroe, who is then elected in the election of 1816, he then employs the Monroe Doctrine. And the Monroe Doctrine, yes, it's targeting the Spanish, who at that time, a lot of their colonies are in rebellion. Again, the American Revolution started a worldwide movement of rebellions across the world against the British Empire, but then also against the Spanish Empire and the other European empires that were out there. But it was primarily the British Empire. It was a human movement, a worldwide movement of humanity against empire, against tyranny, against the consolidation of power. And the Monroe Doctrine, in my opinion, was really, I think, directed as much at Britain as it was at Spain, and saying, hey, don't come here and mess around. Yes, there was a lot of British trade happening. We continued to trade with Britain. We never fully divorced ourselves from Britain, and that's unfortunate because that came back to bite us in the ass later for many, many generations. But I think that it's really important to understand that that's what the Monroe Doctrine, in my opinion, was directed at London as much as it was directed at anywhere else. But London, I think, It was, do not come back thinking you're going to impose your will anywhere in this hemisphere, because you could potentially use that as a staging ground against us, while recognizing that the colonies that are there that are not currently in rebellion, we're not going to, force you out of there, right? And there's still plenty of British Commonwealth countries, Guyana, I think it's Honduras, it's either Honduras or Belize, and then a number of of islands in the Caribbean. The British Virgin Islands would be one of them. Turks and Caicos would be another one. I believe Jamaica is another one. So the point is that when Trump says we are restoring the Monroe Doctrine to its original effect, the way I read that is this line right here, which is Monroe asserted that the New World and the Old World were to remain distinctly separate spheres of influence. And Burning Bright and I pre-recorded the show that we're going to launch tomorrow, the Badlands News Blitz. It's like the news brief, but the podcast version of it. And we talked about and I know we're not talking about Venezuela right now, but I just think it's worth mentioning it while we have it in front of us. If you go to the Badlands News Brief or Badlands Media Substack and you check out the news brief, I wrote today about the breaking of the international world order. And so, you know what? We are going to start here. This actually is a great place to start. So I didn't mean to go this way, but I just like sometimes you get a stream of consciousness, and here it is. So we're going to listen to Putin. All right. This is in Russian, so I'm going to mute it, and I'm going to read what he says. And he's referring to a lot of episodes that we've been talking about on the Book of Trump and on Breaking History. So I love that this is a very timely moment for him to be saying this. It says Yugoslavia was bombed. He's addressing, I guess it's the Russian Duma. It might be his cabinet, the Russian government, the Kremlin, whatever. It says Yugoslavia was bombed. He's referring to 1999. Under what pretext? Security Council sanctions, perhaps? Where is Yugoslavia? Where are the U.S.? Well, Yugoslavia is just east of Italy in Europe. It's known as the Balkans now. They destroyed the country. Yes, he's referring to America. There was internal conflict. There were problems. But who gave them the right to strike a European capital? No one. They just decided to do it. And their satellites followed. Satellites meaning all the other countries of the UN that suckle up the teat of the United States, of the State Department, the vassals of the U.S. State Department. And their satellites followed suit, catching up. That's international law for you. And what was the pretext for invading Iraq? The development of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. They invaded, destroyed the country, created a hotbed of international terrorism, and then it turned out they were wrong. Then they said intelligence had let them down. Wow. They destroyed the country, intelligence let them down, and that's it. That's the whole explanation. It turns out there were no weapons of mass destruction there. No one was preparing any. On the contrary, there used to be some, but they were destroyed as required. And he's referring to the chemical weapons that we, the United States, illegally sold to Saddam Hussein in 1980. And then we told Saddam Hussein to use those chemical weapons against Iran. And then we turned around and we sold weapons to Iran using Israel as the middleman. And we told Iran to use those weapons against Iraq. And we had what was called the Iraq-Iran War of the 1980s, one of the bloodiest wars of the 20th century. And how did they enter Syria? Security Council sanctions? No. They do whatever they want. Yeah. And so that is Putin basically saying there is no such thing as international law. International law is a lie. It is just something that it's a bedtime story that the United States and the UN tells weaker countries to keep them in line, threatening them that if they step out of line and they violate international law, they're going to get sanctioned. But anytime the United States wants to go destroy a country, we just go do it. And anyone who stands in our way, well, they're going to bear the brunt. They're going to get both barrels of the U.S. military. Okay, so then here is Delcy Rodriguez, who I have dubbed in the Trumpomania soap opera Kokomo, which is hence why I played the Beach Boys song at the beginning of the show. She is now the acting interim president of Venezuela, appointed by Nicolás Maduro under a continuity of government external emergency procedure. And we'll watch that video here in a second. But here's what she says along those lines. She says, okay, so she says, we are not Chevron Partners, which is a U.S. company. That is the mechanism, but they want it without paying. She's talking about the oil because they want to reduce costs for the United States in its economic process, which is already badly hit today. They are not the world's leading economic power. China has displaced them. And they believe and think they can regain that position and need the oil from Venezuela to be given as a gift. It is stolen. That we as a people will allow, we are going to give it away the oil. We will give away our riches. Well, they have to do it with an assault with military force. A merchant ship that transports or has transported oil from Venezuela, and what his highest authority said when asked, what are they going to do with the oil? Keep it? They talk so much about Trinidad robbing people. Oil from Venezuela is being stolen there without any legal justification. Zero. It is blatant, flagrant rape, barbaric and wild, international law. They want to impose the law of the jungle. And she's absolutely right. That is exactly what this is. This is the law of the jungle. Okay. Do not let the Republican Party woo you with this, this romantic idea of like American exceptionalism and American dominance and all that we can just go around the world and point a gun at people's heads and say, we can do whatever we want. That's what criminals do. Criminals walk around and they use the threat of force or force itself, violence, to get whatever they want, to take things from people, to scare people, to get people, to coerce people into doing what they want. That is what bad men do. Okay. The Bible talks about this in very clear terms. That's what evil, wicked men do. Okay. And yet we have these Republicans who seem so eager to do this and justify it from the American perspective. And I want to play this clip of Rick Scott. So Rick Scott, the U.S. Senator, right here, listen to what he says.
So proud of what the president did, and Marco Rubio and Pete Hegseth and everybody, our military, Maria Corina Machado, and what they did in Venezuela is going to change Latin America. This is the start of changing Venezuela. Then we're going to fix Cuba. Nicaragua will get fixed. Next year, we'll get a new president in Colombia. We're going to start, the democracy is coming back to this hemisphere.
So democracy is coming back to this hemisphere. This guy is a wicked, evil man. This is everything the Bible tells us to look out for in humanity is right here in Rick Scott. He is a wicked, evil man. He is a tyrant. Everything that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, the founding fathers opposed in 1775, Rick Scott embodies. He is the city of London personified in a man. Same goes with Tom Cotton. Here's Tom Cotton talking about what are we going to do now with these Venezuelans that we're responsible for?
Yeah. Sean, the government of Venezuela faces a very, very significant crisis. They can't get oil out of their country anymore. That's the way the ruling Chavistas have supported themselves and their lifestyles, as you say, is stolen oil. But because of our Navy blockade, because we've now seized Maduro, the head of the Chavista regime, they can no longer export that oil. They can't get the oil out of the ground. They can't get the revenue from it. the lights are literally going to go off. They're not going to be able to pay policemen or firefighters or teachers or what have you unless they begin to cooperate with President Trump in the United States. That's the immediate leverage we have. In the long term, though, we helped create the Venezuelan oil industry until Chavez expropriated the assets of American companies. Our refineries in the Gulf Coast are predominantly designed to process heavy crude Venezuelan oil. We would love in the long term to see that partnership return under a legitimate government of the that serves the interests of the Venezuelan people and that is pro-American. That's in our interest, that's in their interest, that's in the interest of stability, order, and prosperity in our backyard.
Yeah, and so he's basically saying that if they don't do exactly what we want, then they're going to starve. So they're going to do exactly what we tell them to do, these Venezuelans, or we're going to cut off their money and we're going to make sure that they all starve to death. Hugo Chavez, we're going to do Hugo Chavez on Monday because I've been looking into him. He, obviously I've been told my entire life that he's this evil, wicked man and he was this terrible person. But the more I've looked into him, the more I realize that I think it's just like it's the whole Putin narrative all over again with Hugo Chavez. My understanding is that, and we'll dive into it on Monday, but my understanding is that Hugo Chavez seized the oil because he viewed the oil industry as a bunch of, they were a cartel. They were criminals. He was watching what they were doing in the Middle East. He was watching how they had destroyed Iraq, how they were destroying Afghanistan. And he recognized that they would ultimately one day do the same thing in Venezuela. He came out and said they were probably going to accuse me of being the head of the cartels, even though I've been fighting the cartels. And then they will come here, they will overthrow our government, they'll install a puppet, and they'll steal all of our oil. That's I think pretty much a direct quote from Hugo Chavez. So you can argue against that. You can say, well, that makes him a wicked man, that makes him bad. But I would say that makes him no different than what Vladimir Putin and Delcy Rodriguez just laid out in those videos. It's the law of the jungle. The strong do what the strong want, and the weak fall into line. And so Hugo Chavez was strong enough to take the oil and say that oil belongs to us. Y'all came and you colonizers came and exploited it. That's that, right? So once he does that, that's when Hugo Chavez becomes obviously an enemy of the regime. And then his protege, he dies in 2013. His protege, Nicolás Maduro, becomes president in 2014, and the rest is history. But I've been tracking the Venezuela thing for 10 years, like following it loosely, not as closely as I follow it now. And I remember 10 years ago that, Alex Jones was saying 10 to 12 years ago that Venezuela used to be this thriving economy. It was this robust place, the greatest economy in the Western Hemisphere outside of the United States. And yet it was being destroyed by Nicolás Maduro and Hugo Chavez because of socialism. And again, looking into it now, it seems more like it was actually being destroyed by international sanctions and the fact that the U.S. and the UN said that, for example, the Venezuelans weren't allowed to import food. They could import no food. And so people in Venezuela were starving to death because they were not allowed to bring food in. And so a guy named Alex Saab, same guy that defects to the Trump administration in 2018, 2019, becomes an informant and then is sent back and rejoins the Maduro government in 2024. Alex Saab is arrested. The reason he was arrested by the U.S. government at the end of Trump's first term, the charges he was charged with was orchestrating through Iran cargo ships that were bringing food into Venezuela. Now, they accused him of embezzling and stealing the money. That he said he was bringing food in, but really he was taking all the money for himself. I think if that were true, Nicolás Maduro would have, had him arrested and thrown in prison with all the other corrupt officials that were being arrested and thrown in prison. Seems to me like Alex Saab probably was actually trying to orchestrate food logistics, getting food to Venezuela. But America, would not allow him to do that under Obama and then purportedly under the first Trump administration, and under Biden, by the way. So, when you start to look at that in the context, you really take a step back and you objectively look at it. You're like, man, who are the bad guys here? Is this Nicolás Maduro really the bad guy? I mean, objectively speaking, or are the people saying that, you know, Venezuela can't import their own food, they can't have control of their own resources, they can't have control over their own destiny, they can't control their own government, they can't have their own sovereignty? I would say the external force imposing that will is actually the bad guy. And with that said, I can show, I think it's probably worthwhile to just show this clip. This is from this show, October 7th. Now they're talking about doing a land-based invasion into Venezuela. I wonder if we're going to see Maduro get arrested, extracted, taken back to the U.S. Maybe like General Flynn said, you should willfully surrender before it's too late. Maybe Maduro will willfully surrender. I'm sorry. Take me away. Take me away. No, 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 no. Please take me away. Take me away. No, no, no. And then the U.S. military moves in. Yeah. And so that's just for anybody who's new here, who wasn't watching the show back in October. That's, you know, this is not a surprise to us. Like we kind of saw this coming, and this tracks with what we were expecting. So here is Delcy Rodriguez after she's sworn in.
Una potencia energética.
I'm hoping this is the right clip.
Nos ha traído tremendos problemas porque ustedes.
Nope, that's not it. Oh, just give me 1 second. So well, before we go to Delcy, we can just play this one. The one of Trump being asked about Maria Corina Machado.
The answer is yes. Yes. No, we haven't. No, we haven't.
Mr. President, on Monday.
Oh, I think it would be very tough for her to be the leader. She doesn't have the support within or the respect within the country. She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect.
Mr. President, is it possible that the U.S. ends up administrating Venezuela for years?
Well, it won't cost us anything because the money coming out of the ground is very substantial. So it's not going to cost us anything. We will. Well, we want safety there. We want to be surrounded by countries that aren't housing all of our enemies all over the world. That was happening, and you don't want to have that. But we're going to be rebuilding, and we're not spending money. The oil companies are going to go in. They're going to spend money. We're going to take back the oil that, frankly, we should have taken back a long time ago. A lot of money is coming out of the ground. We're going to get reimbursed for all of that. We're going to get reimbursed for everything that we spend. So it's going to be a very important. This is a very big evening that took place last night. We have to be surrounded by safe, secure countries.
Yep. So Trump shoots down the idea of Maria Corina Machado becoming the leader of Venezuela, being installed by externally. And so Delcy Rodriguez, who is, I'm sure many of you were probably watching the Daily Herald. If you weren't, I was on there with John, and I played this clip, and this clip is Delcy Rodriguez's first television address, and they had it all over the place the other day, but the algorithm's really burying it. But this is the short version of it, where she just goes on to lament. She says that it has a Zionist tinge, that this whole the overthrow of the Venezuelan government is shamefully a Zionist tinge. She talks about the history of the Bolivar. The chains have been broken. Our enemies intend to enslave us again. We will never. She says all Venezuela is mobilized. We will never surrender. And then she says right here, she pulls out a red folder.
Se activa toda Venezuela y el decreto.
She says that decree has already been signed by President Maduro, the only president of Venezuela. There is only one president in this country, and his name is Nicolás Maduro. Now, the longer version of this, which I was trying to locate, she mentions the external emergency, and maybe this one's it.
8:08 de la madrugada. El gobierno
Okay,
de
8
los
in the
Estados
morning, the U.S. government launched a military
constituye
invasion,
una terrible
caused a
mancha
horrible stain.
en esa operación
A horrible stain, this military, in our relationship with the U.S. President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Celia Flores, we had already warned that a transaction was underway under false excuses, under false pretenses, and that the mask had fallen off and had only one objective, and that was regime change in Venezuela. And that this change of regime would also allow for the capture of our energy resources, of our mineral resources, of our natural resources. And that's where the real goal is. And the world and the international community should know that this is the case. We have convened this Council of Defense of the nation where they participate, the public authorities of the Venezuelan state. We are accompanied by the president of the Venezuelan legislative branch, Dr. Jorge, the president of the judiciary, Dr. Carilia Beatriz, the president of moral power, fiscal general Tare William Sabe. He's the attorney general, and also the accomplices,
el ministro
the minister of defense,
de la defensa,
the CEO's boss, the citizen security analysis. The minister of defense would be the Vladimir Pedrino. That's who you just saw on screen. This guy right here is that Moreno? I think his name is Moreno, if I'm not mistaken. The Council of Mayors and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, in addition to special guests that we have convened for this Council of National Defense. So this is a special council they've convened of all these different government officials, including like local mayors, CEOs. There's a constitutional, I think, precedent that establishes this meeting. It says, from this, we demand immediate release of President Nicolás Maduro and his wife, Silvia Flores, only president of Venezuela. President Nicolás Maduro is here. The high command, most important of the state of Venezuela. Yeah, so they didn't cover that that same one did not have the external emergency mentioned in it.
Secretario General, Servas, esta pregunta pone en grave peligro curso natural amenaza y miembros OPEC fuerzas exteriores como para.
So we'll have to come back and circle back on that. But the point is that I believe that there is a continuity of government situation evolving in Venezuela that would mirror what this might actually be it right here. It says, and here we are ruling alongside the people, the Venezuelan government rules in our country, no one else, no external agent that governs Venezuela. Es Venezuela. It is its constitutional government, popular power in Argentina. And today, we are making a balance in the agri-food sector. Yeah. No. It's talking about agriculture. So, no. We'll have to wait and see. But I think the point is I definitely think there's an external threat. Now, getting back to like the actual Maduro arrest, I'm sure people on Badlands and other places were covering it all week. There were some hilarious moments in signal that this was not what we are told it is. One of the best signals was this little clip from New York City where the U.S. military literally is There's Maduro in the van. They're driving with the van doors open, and people like in New York City are just walking up to the van and like talking to these guys. Like has anybody ever seen anything like this? Like where they have a prisoner like on display with the vans open. They're driving at like parade speed so that you can walk next to it and film it. How is this not a security threat, right?
Good job, good job.
When they shut the doors and they're, oh, no, can't let them film it. It's like they're displaying that they have Maduro, right? There's like there's armored military vehicles, in the caravan. So this is all like being done by the military. It's very goofy. It's very, very silly. Trump talks about Celia Flores being arrested because she's also a narco-terrorist. But then here's Lukashenko, and he gave commentary about this. I think Putin also said something about this, that Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, was offered to stay in her homeland, but she chose to be with her husband, Lukashenko. So like the official narrative isn't even quite there. Like we don't even know, because apparently she's being charged with the crime, but doesn't really sound like she actually is. Formally she is absolutely being charged. That's what the charging documents say. But Lukashenko and Putin are claiming that she was offered to remain in country, but wanted to stay with her husband. And then if you go back to Trump was saying that, let's see, right here, Trump talks about the insane asylum. So I'm going to play this insane asylum segment, the prisons being emptied out. And then and I'm going to step away because I got my kids are calling out for me. So I'm going to let this play, and then I'll be back in a second. I'm going to let this play for a few minutes. But listen to what Trump says about the prisons and the insane asylums and the mental institutions.
Of the United States. Maduro sent savage and murderous gangs, including the bloodthirsty prison gang, Tren de Aragua, to terrorize American communities nationwide. And he did indeed. They were in Colorado. They took over apartment complexes. They cut the fingers off people if they called police. They were brutal, but they're not so brutal now. And I just have to congratulate our military, Pete, and everybody, and our National Guard, because the job that they've done, whether it's in Washington, D.C., where we have a totally safe city, where it was one of the most unsafe cities anywhere in the world, frankly, and now we have no crime in Washington, D.C. We haven't had a killing. We had the terrorist attack a few weeks ago, a little bit of a different kind of a threat. But we haven't had a killing in a long period of time, 6-7 months. We used to have on average two a week in Washington, our capital. We don't have that anymore. The restaurants are opening. Everyone's happy. They're walking their daughters. They're walking their children, their wives. They walk to restaurants. Restaurants are opening all over Washington, D.C. So I want to thank the National Guard. I want to thank our military. And I want to thank law enforcement. Been amazing. And they should do it with more cities. We're doing it, as you know, and we're doing it in Memphis, Tennessee right now, and crime is down. We've just sort of started a few weeks ago, but crime is down now 77%. And the governor of Louisiana called, great person, and he wanted us to help him, as you know, in a certain very nice part of Louisiana. And we have done that. And it was a rough section, and we have crime down. I understand it's down to almost nothing already after 2.5 weeks. New Orleans, it's down to almost nothing. And we've only been there for 2.5 weeks. Can't imagine why governors wouldn't want us to help. We also helped, as you know, in Chicago, and crime went down a little bit there. We did a very small help because we had no working ability with the governor. The governor was a disaster and the mayor was a disaster, but it knocked down crime. But we're pulling out of there. When they need us, we'll know. You'll know. You'll be writing about it. And likewise, Los Angeles, where we saved Los Angeles early on, where the head of the police department made a statement that if the federal government didn't come in, we would have lost Los Angeles. That's long after the fires. That's when they had the riots in Los Angeles. We did a great job. Got no credit for it whatsoever, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. We don't need the credit. But we'll be pulling out when they need us. They'll call or we'll.
Okay. So what Trump says right there is he says that they sent the people from the prisons. He said they sent them from, and then he goes on to talk about like DC and how that impacts DC. But the insane asylums, the prisons, and it's doesn't make any sense because if, again, we talked about this before in this show, but if they are,
and they came from
mental
institutions and insane asylums. They came from prisons and jails. The reason I say both, they sound similar. Actually, prisons a little bit more.
Who put them in the prison? Hugo Chavez? Nicolás Maduro? Doesn't make any sense. Again, it just all seems very, 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 very silly. Okay, and so getting back to the narrative of what we're being fed here. Trump then talks about, let's see. So then we have this right here. So the New York Times and Washington Post learned of a secret U.S. raid on Venezuela soon before it was scheduled to begin Friday night, but held off publishing what they knew to avoid endangering U.S. troops. Two people familiar with the communications between the administration and the news organization said. Now, there's two ways to look at this. Either this is all bullshit or this is true, but why would something as sensitive as that information be given to journalists, especially by the Trump administration? None of that makes any sense whatsoever. The Washington Post obviously is a CIA mouthpiece, as is the New York Times. But since when did they care about like putting U.S. troops in danger? Since when do they care about making Trump look good? If anything, I mean, given a lot of their reactions to what Trump has done in Venezuela, they would see it as an opportunity to like make him look bad, to cut him off. So this is all the whole thing is just very strange. I do think that, and Semaphore is, if I go to Semaphore, I'll show you what Semaphore is. Semaphore is a news outlet that was purportedly started by former intelligence agents. Look, if I go to it, they say about us. So yeah, here it is right here. It says Semaphore is an American news website founded in 2022 by Ben Smith, a former editor-in-chief of BuzzFeed News and media columnist at the New York Times, and Justin B. Smith, the former CEO of Bloomberg Media Group. It says Vox has described Semaphore as a collection of newsletters plus a website aimed at an upscale audience that understands topics like Washington politics and Silicon Valley tech. But once more, the website is free to access and supported by advertisements, etc. Let's see. And then intelligence. Well, I guess they're not going to say that here on the Wikipedia, but my understanding is that this entire website is like they have like guest writers, and the guest writers are like former intelligence agents. And I mean, I've read all sorts of articles in there that made me feel like the whole website was just glowing, like radioactive glowing. But there are some interesting stories they post there because of the stuff that they know behind the scenes. It does mention here that one of the founders going to Davos says the duo met in Manhattan in 2008 and kept in touch. At a conference in Davos in 2018, they began a series of discussions that led to the development of Semaphore over 4 years later. And I bet you that discussion in Davos was probably that speech that Trump gave where he basically said globalism is dead and globalism is over. That would be my guess. But anyway. Okay, so getting back to the central narrative and what we were told. So here's Trump asserting that Delcy Rodriguez, who I'm calling Kokomo Rodriguez because I think it's a good fighter's name for Rodriguez. That she was picked by Maduro.
You said earlier today that you weren't going to back Machado to come back and be the opposite.
I'm sorry, we already watched that. This is the one that I meant to share. Was her getting sworn in on the sarcophagus of Hugo Chavez. She invokes the name of Hugo Chavez. You can't tell from this picture, but the flag's back here. It's the Venezuelan flag next to the Palestinian flag. Here's the New York Times. Venezuela's interim leader defies Trump and calls Maduro the only president. All right. Here's Trump, as I noted on I don't know if I said this on Badlands Daily yesterday. I definitely said it in the pre-recording with Burning Bright this morning. I went back and checked, and the only time that Trump has ever used the term president as a title to describe Maduro is in this post from January 3rd. It's the only time he's written the word Maduro so many times on True Social. This is the only time he's ever called him President Maduro. Thought that was interesting. Here is an article of Blackwater founder Eric Prince secretly meeting with Delcy Rodriguez. This is from 6 years ago. And the article claims that Prince had plotted using mercenary army to overthrow Maduro. And then speculation that Prince could be a back channel for the White House. So here's Maduro's son holding a rally where he says they are expecting a civil war. They still say it. Will they achieve it? And everyone says no. Will they divide us? And this crowd shouts no. And here's Trump being asked. This is back on, I think this is like December 23rd. This is 2 or 3 weeks ago. Trump being asked about Gustavo Petro, the Colombian president.
Response to the United States taking sanctioned oil from Venezuela. Colombian President Gustavo Petro criticized the United States by saying, well, the Southwest is stolen land and that it should be returned to Latin America. I just wanted to know what your response to that is.
Well, he has to watch because, he's got drug factories. They make cocaine in Colombia. And he's no friend of the United States. He's very bad guy. And he's got to watch his ass because he makes cocaine and they send it into the United States of America from Colombia. We love the Colombian people. I love the Colombian people. They're great people, energetic, smart, great. But their new leader is a troublemaker, and he better watch it. He better close up those cocaine factories. They have at least 3 major cocaine factories. We know where they are. He better close them up fast, yeah.
Yeah. And obviously we've talked about Petro so many times on this show. I wanted to address a few comments in the chat while I'm waiting for the Miro board to fully load. But in the chat, Shire Reeve, if I'm saying that right, why pay to keep them in prison when you can unleash them on your perceived enemies? That is one explanation for what's happening here. I would actually argue that were these guys ever in prison? Here's what I think actually probably was happening. What I think was actually happening was that these guys were in the jungles of Ecuador and Colombia and maybe Venezuela and started getting bombed by the Colombian military and maybe the Venezuelan military. And so they fled and they were being literally driven out of the region because they were being blown to hell. And all of the research that I've done indicates that that's what was happening. And I mean, y'all have seen this stuff before, but I'll just remind you, here's just some articles from the past year. Okay. Here's the Treasury Department sanctioning Gustavo Petro for his role in the global illicit drug trade. This is October 24th. But here's 11 months ago. So this is 11 months ago would have been in November. So it's December 2024. Colombia airstrikes against the drug cartels, 4 killed. Colombia, here is September 25th, 2025. Colombia's top drug cartel in decline may lay down arms. Here is March 29th, 2025. Colombia arrests Medellin cartel founder Carlos Leder. That's an interesting story I've looked into. Maybe we'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. Here's the Colombia to extradite drug kingpin Otaniel to the U.S. That's April of 2022. So this is like right after Petro comes into power. This is from this past summer. Colombia arrests 198 suspects from the Clan de Golfo membership. From May of 2025, Colombia arrests over 200 suspects of cartel accused of paying recruits $3,500 for dead police officers. Here is a press conference that they held back on February 8th, where Gustavo Petro and his generals say that the Mexican Sinaloa drug cartel was actually the head of the Liberation Army, the National Liberation Army, the ELN guerrilla group, which has been operating in northern South America and Central America since 1964, fought alongside of Pablo Escobar and Che Guevara. And they're saying that Mexico actually is running that. The Mexican cartels are running those gangs. Nicolás Maduro has been accused of being the head of the ELN. That's why I bring that up. And then here's September 19th, 2025. Colombia opens peace talks with country's largest criminal organization because they have been fighting them kinetically for at least the past year. Here's the statement from the Qatari Foreign Ministry. This is what this article right here is based on. This formal statement from the Qatari government, where the Qatar announces the conclusion of the first round of mediation between the government of Colombia and the self-proclaimed Gaitanista Army of Colombia, which would be the Gulf Clan cartel, September 18th, 2025. So they met for 4 days in Doha. And my understanding is that they're surrendering basically because they've been blown up so much that, I mean, here's the article. The article says the Colombian government has launched peace talks with Clan del Golfo, the country's largest and most powerful criminal organization, said officials. The talks began Thursday in Doha, the capital of Qatar, with the initial phase focused on building trust between the parties and implementing pilot projects in 3 regions where the group is most active. Alvaro Jimenez, head of the government delegation, and Luis Armada Perez, representing Clan del Golfo, signed a joint statement formally declaring the start of what they called a peace process. A few weeks later, Gustavo Petro suggests that Qatar could serve as the mediator for military actions between the U.S. and Venezuela, which is probably how this whole thing's going to come to a conclusion, if it even needs to. So anyway, it's very clear. So like here's a Semaphore article, and yeah, so they call themselves intelligence for the new world economy. And I don't know, something about this whole outlet, they definitely carry water for the globalist unipolar hegemony. And the headline here is, as Trump pressures Venezuela, investors see major opportunities. And this is why the momentum was with Trump and why they were like backing him to overthrow Venezuela, because they thought they were going to get the government they wanted. As President Donald Trump takes an increasingly aggressive approach toward regime change in Venezuela, international investment giants are already eyeing potential benefits that Nicolás Maduro's ouster would create. During the last month's IMF World Bank meetings in Washington, Barclays organized a private meeting to talk investment opportunities with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. 2 sources familiar with the meeting told Semaphore. The meeting was widely attended by investment firms, hedge funds, and others interested in future business in Venezuela, said Rafael de la Cruz, the director of the U.S. Office of Machado, and Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia, who is recognized by the U.S. as the winner of the last Venezuelan election. The opposition leader's team has also held the informal conversations with the World Bank, IMF, and Inter-American Development Bank about Venezuela's future, De La Cruz said. So those 3 entities, the World Bank, the IMF, and the Inter-American Development Bank, were all kept out of Venezuela by Hugo Chavez and Nicolás Maduro. And now all of a sudden they're licking their chops to go in there and start lending money to people, because lending money is how they ultimately end up owning everything. That's how these kind of banks work, right? Argentina, for example, which Nicolás Maduro was very clear. He said Milei is a bad guy. Milei is working for the globalists. He's working for all the bad guys, the bad people out there who run the world. Milei works for them. He's their hatchet man. Mike Benn said the same thing a few years ago when Milei first came into power, is that he thinks that Milei is actually an agent working for the IMF, because at the time Argentina was the #1 debtor in the world to the IMF, with I think Egypt being #2. And to the extent that the Argentinian legislature, I want to say this is 2023, so either 2022 or 2023, the Argentinian legislature passed a law saying that nobody that year had to pay taxes, which means they didn't service the debt, which means the IMF didn't get any money. And so the IMF sent Milei in there, the theory goes, to privatize everything, because Argentina had a lot of socialist policies, as I think all of these Latin American governments do. And by privatizing everything, the banks could then come in and buy them at rock bottom prices and end up owning everything. So whereas before they were lending money to entities that were using the money to whatever, make purchases, cash flow, government operations, what have you, they then just come in and they buy everything and they own it all. You will own nothing and you will be happy. That is the essence of mercantilism. It's the essence of crony capitalism. It's effectively what's happening in the United States right now. You saw Trump the other day pass I don't know if it was an executive order, but saying that transnational corporations like BlackRock could no longer purchase single-family homes in America. That is a move that Putin would have done 20 years ago, and the Republican Party would have called Putin a dictator and a socialist and a communist for doing that. But is it really a communist or socialist position to say that a transnational corporation that operates in the trillions of dollars probably at the end of the day, that they can come in and purchase single-family homes, buy up an entire neighborhood, and then basically become the landlord for an entire nation, which gives them a monopoly over all the people. And they can say, hey, if you don't do what we want, we will raise your rent. We will kick you out of your house. You know, I mean, that's how you impose things like social credit scores, is by owning the housing, owning the food supply, all those sort of things. And Maria Corina Machado, it looks like, was promising all of that and more to these entities in Venezuela. That's not happening anymore. Trump said, sorry, lady, but don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. You're fucking out, Maria Hakuna Matata. You don't get to be Venezuelan leader. So anyway, that's let's take a little break. We'll come back. We will I'll hit some comments. Maybe I'll do some rants or some boosts, and we will continue exploring this from other perspectives.
Aruba, Jamaica, ooh, I wanna take you. Bermuda, Bahama, come on, pretty mama. Key Largo, Montego, baby, why don't we go? Jamaica, off the Florida Keys. There's a place called Kokomo. That's where.
Soft disclosure, just dropped new favorites for the season. The lotion, your 5-ounce favorite, is still here. And now we've added full 11-ounce bottles. New lavender tea tree deodorant, clean, calm, and effective. New tallow bars, chamomile lemon rose and naked. Rich moisture that actually works. And now the lineup is complete. Beard oil in unscented and spiced vanilla. Palo lip balms, available in chamomile mint, vanilla, naked, and vanilla tangerine. Palo bar minis for pocket-ready hydration. Available in vanilla coffee and naked. And finally, lavender vanilla lotion. Clean, calm, and made to work. Visit softdisclosure.com. Use code Badlands and get 15% off. Soft Disclosure, for truth you can gift.
Get you some of that beard oil.
Now that I'm alone, got the close up. Do you see how awesome my beard looks right now?
I use the beard oil every single day. First thing.
Comes out feeling all silky smooth.
I take the dropper and I manually apply the oil directly
hair.
to my mustache.
Nice and, oh man, I love it.
And then I do drops all throughout the hair, and then I just rub it all in. And then I top it off with the tallow stick on the face.
But I feel like I have to grow a beard just to try this beard oil. It sounds
Do it, Jay.
amazing.
It's all from softdisclosure.com, and the best part about it is you'll be supporting Badlands Media, Annie from Willow and Farms, and basically 3 of Annie's neighbors. So that's 5 total American companies that you'd be supporting with one purchase.
I have been using the soft disclosure scentless beard oil every day after the shower. It looks unkempt, but it feels silky smooth. I want to look a little wild and unapproachable, but for the woman I trust, she'll be like, oh, it's actually kind of soft. He is approachable after all. Otherwise, stay away. And soft disclosure will help you too with that, if that's the very specific vibe you're going for.
That is very specific, yes. You guys are supporting American businesses when you do that. It's absolutely incredible, and you get a great, great product.
Gold has exploded to new all-time highs, surging over 70% this year. In silver, it's on fire, rocketing more than 150%, shattering records and outpacing everything. From everyday Americans to billionaires and central banks, everyone's rushing to see these timeless safe havens. That's why Badlands has partnered with award-winning GoldCo. They make protecting your savings with real gold and silver straightforward and stress-free. If you're serious about safeguarding your future, go to badlandsgold.com today. You'll get their free gold and silver kit. Plus, you could qualify for up to 10% in free bonus silver, the unbeatable offer right now. Act fast. Visit badlandsgold.com or click the link in the description. One last time, it's badlandsgold.com. Introducing Silent. Empower your right to disconnect with silent Faraday cage bags. In a world where tech never sleeps, our mission is to keep you safe, private, and healthy. Our patented technology shields your device from hacking, tracking, and EMF radiation, giving you autonomy over your digital life. Disconnecting sparks creativity, strengthens relationships, and brings peace of mind. With Silent, you get effortless gear built with integrity, always staying one step ahead to protect your data and security. Choose Silent and reclaim your freedom to disconnect. Visit badlandsmedia.tv/Faraday and use promo code Badlands to snag your 10% discount. That's badlandsmedia.tv/Faraday, promo code Badlands. All right, welcome back to Geopolitics with Ghost. Today is January 9th, the second hour, January 9th, 2026. This is the second hour of the show. So there's a few things I wanted to look at here that I've been tracking and researching while I was on vacation when I had free time. And one of them is this Celia Flores narrative. So Celia Flores is the wife of Nicolás Maduro. She was an attorney. Her story is that she was an attorney operating or working under Hugo Chavez while Nicolás Maduro was one of his protege, one of his aides, and that's how they met. And then they got married, I think, in 2014 after Maduro became president. They both, I believe, I know she has children from a previous marriage. I believe he does as well. He may or may not. But I'm pretty sure I've seen pictures of him with kids, so I'm pretty sure he does have kids. But back in 2015, Celia Flores's sons were arrested in Florida. Let's see. And so I went and looked into this. So in 1994, Maduro or Hugo Chavez, a coup is launched against Hugo Chavez. Or I'm sorry, an unsuccessful coup. Says, as lead attorney for Hugo Chavez's defense team, she helped secure Chavez's release from prison in 1994 after his unsuccessful coup in 1992. And then her sons were arrested in right here. Of course, it's like taking us to articles that were published this past week, which are always a bad sign whenever you're getting pushed to articles that are brand new, because it's like, well, that just means you have the most up-to-date propaganda. But the sons basically are grabbed in Florida in 2015. They are arrested with 1 kilo of cocaine. The accusation against them is, the narrative that we are given about them is that they, out of desperation, because Maduro wins the election at the end of 2013, he enters office in 2014, and then he's widely hated, he's widely despised, and so all this money is coming in, which probably is true, that a bunch of money came in to the opposition against him and his political allies. And so in order to raise money to give to others, because he just won an election, a year or two before, he sent his son, him and his wife sent her adult son, to Florida with 1 kilo of cocaine, which is not that much cocaine as I understand it, if you're, trying to raise a bunch of money, to sell that 1 kilo of cocaine to bring back. And how much is a kilo of cocaine worth? Maybe people in the chat know. I can't imagine it's enough to fund an entire political campaign. It says, at the source in producer countries like Colombia or Bolivia, a kilogram can cost as little as $1,600 to $2,000. Okay, and then it says in the United States, it could range from $28,000 to $70,000. Let's just be generous and say he sells it for $70,000. Is that funding a political campaign? $70,000? I mean, maybe. But I don't know. Seems like there's an easier way. But again, we're looking at the narrative. The narrative is that Maduro is the head of he's a drug kingpin at the head of an empire, the head of an entire drug cartel. If that is the truth, then why does he have to send his brand new wife's adult son, to Florida to sell a kilo of cocaine because he's running out of money and he needs to fund a political campaign against none of this makes any sense. It's like I'm trying my best to make the narrative that they're telling us work, but every time I do, it just gets too stupid to follow. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. How can the guy who's the head of the drug cartels run out of money? Like, how could he not have enough money to finance an election campaign against his political enemies? Again, none of this makes any sense. Let me just pull up ChatGPT because every other search mechanism is having issues. So what's interesting about Celia Flores's son being arrested and his prosecution is that the prosecution hinges on two witnesses who are also being prosecuted by the United States government for their own crimes. And one of them, as I understand it, he lies so much during his official testimony that they basically throw out his deal and they say you no longer get your plea deal because you lied so much. So his testimony becomes completely. This is like after the fact. I think after this guy gets convicted of trafficking drugs in Florida. one of the people who testified, he loses his immunity deal because he was so dishonest during his testimony, meaning he's an unreliable witness. The other guy is basically coerced. It's like, if you want clemency, you need to say exactly what we want you to say. And that's the whole prosecution is based on the opinions of these two people. And that's what they use to prosecute this. I think it's two sons. I think it's two brothers, as I understand it. Find the case from 2015. And so the reason I bring all this up is because now we have so here it is, the Narcos-Brinos affair. So the Narcoso-Brinos affair is a situation of events that surrounded the two it's nephews of Nicolás Maduro and his wife Celia Flores, who were arrested for. So it wasn't their son. It wasn't her son. It was her nephews. The nephews Efrain Antonio Campo Flores and Francisco Flores de Fuentes were arrested on the 10th of November 2015 by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agents Administration in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. So they were arrested in Haiti after attempting to transport, it says, 800 kilograms of cocaine into the United States. Okay, so a year later, 18 November 2016, the two nephews were found guilty with the cash allegedly destined to help their family stay in power. On the 14th of December 2017, the two were sentenced to 18 years of imprisonment. In October 2022, the Campos and Flores were released and returned to Venezuela as part of a prisoner swap negotiated with the United States, in which 5 Venezuelan American directors of the oil refinery company Citgo, collectively known as the Citgo Six, who were imprisoned in Venezuela, were exchanged. Okay, so now this is saying it's 800 kilograms, but all of the articles that I was reading was saying it was the guys flew up to Florida to like meet with the buyer with 1 kilogram of cocaine. And that's what I thought was so unbelievable. I was like, if you're going to do this, why would you only bring 1 kilogram of cocaine? 800 kilograms makes a little more sense. But again, the whole thing is predicated on the testimony of two people, one of which their testimony is later thrown out, and the other one is so heavily coerced that his testimony really can't be considered as reliable because his arm's being twisted and he's being threatened with his own freedom unless he does this. Okay. Now, the reason this becomes relevant is because what's happening now so it's 1,800 pounds of cocaine, and they say it was destined for New York. Says the two were interviewed separately by DEA on a DEA plane. Campo stated on the DEA plane that he was the adopted stepson of President Maduro and that he grew up in the Maduro household while being raised by Flores. He was also shown a picture of a man with a kilo package of cocaine, replying, "That's me." And when asked what was in the package, he said, "You know what it is." The two men possessed Venezuelan diplomatic passports but did not have diplomatic immunity, according to former head of DEA International Operations Michael Vigil. A later raid of Efrain Antonio Campo Flores' Casa de Campo mansion and yacht in the Dominican Republic revealed an additional 280 pounds of cocaine and 22 pounds of heroin, with 176 pounds of the drugs found in the home, while the remainder was discovered in his yacht. Due to the extradition process, New York courts could not apprehend those who assisted the nephews on their way to Haiti, though a pilot was later arrested. It was also stated by those close to the case that there are more sealed warrants linked to the incident. Okay, so at the trial, it says their nephews originally pled not guilty to the charges of conspiring to transport cocaine into the U.S., with the two facing up to life in prison. In trial papers filed on the 1st of July 2016, the nephews stated that they were not informed of their rights when detained, attempting to suppress their statements that they made to DEA agents after their arrest. However, on the July 22nd, 2016, their statements made to DEA agents were filed as exhibit by the U.S. Attorney's Office in Manhattan, with the two men confessing to their conspiracy to traffic cocaine into the U.S. that was supposed to be supplied by the Colombian guerrilla group, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC. The pair hoped to make $20 million through multiple drug shipments. A confidential informant posing as a leader of the Sonora cartel confessions testified that Efrain Campo planned to finance Celia Flores's congressional campaign. On 18 November 2016, the jury reached a verdict finding the two nephews guilty of attempting to traffic drugs to the U.S. Murdered informants, two informants that observed the nephews were murdered shortly before and after their arrests, raising concern that the drug trafficking operation was larger than suspected. 2 weeks before the nephews were arrested, the Venezuelan known as Hamoudi, who introduced the nephews to CW1, was, which I think is some confidential witness, was murdered by FARC suppliers. Weeks after the arrest in December 2015, CW1 was murdered as well. It is thought to be that the nephews were not the brains of the trafficking attempt, but were working under the cartel of the Suns. See, this is where we start to get into the bullshit, because the cartel of the Suns, we understand now, was actually created by the CIA. The murdering of informants was a possible way to cover possible involvement by Venezuelan officials. In the United States, the punishment for killing a witness is a federal offense punishable by up to life in prison or execution. So the prisoner exchange in October 2022, Campos and Flores were released and repatriated to Venezuela as part of a settlement agreement with the United States government. In exchange, 5 Venezuelan American directors of the oil refinery company Citgo, collectively known as the Citgo Six, were released from prison in Venezuela. These directors had been detained on charges related to allegedly signing an agreement deemed unfavorable to the Venezuelan subsidiary. That's bullshit. The Citgo Six were part of that laptop that I've explained before that David Boyce brought against them. So these are American Venezuelan citizens working for Citgo, and they were embezzling and stealing money from the Venezuelan government by negotiating these really corrupt contracts with the oil commodity asset companies. Glencore is involved in this. Vitol is involved in this. Trafigura and Helsinki or whatever, or Helsing, whatever that fourth company is called. So the reason that this is all interesting is because now we have the Gray Zone, which is Max Blumenthal's outlet. The Gray Zone is reporting that the prosecution of Maduro, right here, they say, behind the DOJ's politicized indictment of Maduro, a CIA-created network and coerced star witness. The U.S. Department of Justice indictment of Venezuela's kidnapped leader, Nicolás Maduro, is a political rant that relies heavily on coerced testimony from an unreliable witness. Despite DOJ edits, it could expose more Americans to the CIA's own history of drug trafficking. The January 3rd U.S. military raid on Venezuela that kidnapped President Nicolás Maduro and the First Lady, Celia Flores, was followed by the Department of Justice's release of its superseding indictment of the 2 abductees, as well as their son, Nicolásito Maduro, and 2 close political allies, former Minister of Justice Ramon Chacín and ex-Minister of Interior, Justice and Peace Diosdado Cabello. The DOJ has also thrown Tren de Aragua cartel leader Hector Niño Guerrero into the mix of defendants, situating him at the heart of its narrative. The indictment amounts to a 25-page rant accusing Maduro and Flores of a conspiracy to traffic thousands of tons of cocaine to the United States, relying heavily on testimony from coerced witnesses about alleged shipments that largely took place outside U.S. jurisdiction. It accuses Maduro of having partnered with narco-terrorists like TDA, ignoring a recent U.S. intelligence assessment that concluded he had no control over the Venezuelan gang. Yes, and that was from the our own intelligence community said that no, he's actually not running this gang. That's how I said the other one was bullshit. The prosecution of the nephew. Finally, the prosecutor stacked the indictment by charging Maduro with possession of machine guns, a laughable offense which could easily be applied to hundreds of thousands of gun-loving Americans under an antiquated 1934 law. DOJ prosecutors carefully avoid precise data on Venezuelan cocaine exports to the U.S. At one point, they described tons of cocaine. At another, they refer to the shipment of thousands of tons, an astronomical figure that could hypothetically generate hundreds of billions in revenue. At no point did they mention fentanyl, the drug responsible for the overdose death of close to 50,000 Americans in 2024. In fact, the DEA National Drug Threat Assessment issued under Trump's watch this year scarcely mentioned Venezuela. By resorting to vague, deliberately expansive language larded with subjective terms like corrupt and terrorism, the DOJ has constructed a political narrative against Maduro in place of a concrete legal case, while repeatedly referring to Maduro as the de facto illegitimate ruler of the country. The DOJ fails to demonstrate that he is de jure illegitimate under Venezuelan law and will therefore be unable to bypass established international legal precedent granting immunity to heads of state. Further, the indictment relies on transparently unreliable, coerced witnesses like this is the guy, Hugo Pollo Carvajal, a former Venezuelan general who has cut a secret plea deal to reduce his sentence for drug trafficking by supplying dirt on Maduro. Carvajal was said to be a key figure in the so-called Cartel the Sun's drug network, which the DOJ claims was run by Maduro. If and when he appears to testify against the abducted Venezuelan leader, the American public could learn that the cartel was founded not by the deposed Venezuelan president or one of his allies, but by the CIA to traffic drugs into U.S. cities. As sloppy and politicized as the DOJ's indictment might be, it has enabled Trump to frame his lawless Don Road doctrine as an aggressive policy of legal enforcement, emboldening the U.S. president to levy further threats to abduct or bump off heads of state who stand in the way of his resource rampage. This appears to be the real purpose of the imperial courtroom spectacle to come. Weaponizing the narco terror hoax. The bulk of the case against that's my son. I don't know if you can hear that, but the bulk of the case against Maduro rests on the accusation that the defendants engaged in drug trafficking. Probably going to have to close this down because, as you can hear, the children are awake. So we'll pick this up on Tuesday. I'm guessing that it says, according to DOJ, Maduro conspired with TDA as well as the Mexican Sinaloa and Los Zetas cartels to traffic drugs between 2003 and 2011. However, these cartels were not designated by the Trump administration as foreign terrorist organizations until February 2025, a move obviously designed to justify Maduro's kidnapping and juice up his indictment. What's interesting about that is that Maduro and Petro have explicitly disclosed that the Sinaloa cartels are actually the bad guys, and they're the ones who are behind all this. And to prove that, here's my Badlands brief take from this morning. Colombian president, this would be Gustavo Petro, claims Sinaloa cartel is the head of the ELN guerrillas, and they're the ones that they're actually fighting. The ELN guerrillas and the Colombian military have been fighting one another for many, many years, even before Gustavo Petro. So yeah, that's this is all really interesting. This Hugo Carvajal guy, let me pull up him. He's actually been out. They've trotted him out in front of cameras before. I think I remember General Flynn and them were promoting rhetoric that this guy had said. This guy had put out a formal statement. Here's back in August. Says, breaking news, Hugo, this is from Reddit, of course, right? El Pollo, which means the chicken, ex-head of Chavista intelligence, confessed to the U.S. justice system that the regime illegally financed Petro, Lula, Kirchner, Evo, Podemos, and others using PDVSA funds to export its ideological agenda. That's all bullshit because PDVSA doesn't have any money. PDVSA was looted and plundered by Glencore, Trifigura, Vital, and Helsinki. I have all that research right here. We've gone through that research before. That's actually what the accusation is. Even the mainstream narrative supports that idea that PDVSA is poor, it doesn't have any money, right? That's one of the big problems here. So Helsinki, that's one of the commodity asset trading companies. Glencore is another one. Trifigura is another one. PDVSA is the Venezuelan oil company, and of course there's Vital, right? And so the accusation is that they're the ones who stole the money. And here's the article that supports that. This was published by, I think it was Bloomberg. Where's the article? Right. That's right there. Yeah, here it is. Okay, so here's the article where, like, they interviewed David Boyce. There's a picture of David Boyce right there, and David Boyce is explaining that that PDVSA has been plundered and like all their money has been stolen by these transnational oil executives that work for these massive commodity trading companies, right? It says how a brazen plot to rig oil auctions cost Venezuela billions. America's best-known lawyer, a couple of fraudsters, and a private government joined forces to sue the world's largest commodities trading firms. The evidence is explosive, but the bungled lawsuit has so far come to nothing. Oh no. Well, it's not entirely true, actually. While the lawsuit was shut down in the U.S., it was also filed in Europe, and the European authorities seized on the information, and they went and arrested all these people. And I can show you their prosecutions. Here's one of them. The CEO of the entire company, the most powerful guy at the most powerful commodity trading company in the world, who resigned in 2019 after all this became clear that this was happening. He was arrested in August of 2024. That would be Alex Beard. He's set to go to trial in 2027. Yeah, so it talks about bribes to Ecuador, bribes to Mexico, bribes to Nigeria, Africa, West Africa. I mean, these are all places that we've talked about on this show so many times. Nigeria, Cameroon, the Ivory Coast, right? Here is the Trifigura boss. He was arrested many years ago, finally went to trial back in January a year ago, convicted and sent to prison. Landmark case. Trifigura would be the second largest commodity trading company in the world after Glencore, and the CEO sent to prison because of bribing, bribes and fraud related to their oil contracts. Here's Wasiko 6, reported by BBC in November of 2020, being convicted of corruption in Venezuela. Here is Maduro replacing the oil ministers after arresting several in a sweeping corruption probe in 2023. Here's a year later, charging another oil minister with stealing millions from PDVSA. So the idea that PDVSA is like is in bed with the cartels and giving money to the cartels, it doesn't even make any sense, because why would the cartels need PDVSA money? They sell cocaine. Their product is literally guaranteed because all of their customers are physically addicted to their product. So we might be addicted to oil as a society, but their customers are physically addicted to the coke, and without it, they go into physical withdrawal. You know, like if we don't have oil, like gas in our cars, that sucks, but we're not going to go into physical withdrawal over it, right? We might go into psychological withdrawal over it, not being able to drive around, but we're not going into physical withdrawal. You know, that gives the cocaine cartels a significant amount of leverage over their consumer base. So anyway, this is I think all of this is connected to why, like, Trump just announced that the oil industry is going to invest I think he said, was it $100 billion is going to be invested back into Venezuela. I think this is damages related to this laptop. I think we're seeing damages awarded to PDVSA, right? And here's the network of how all this rigging happened. The orange circles are the commodity trading companies. The red are middlemen, right? The green are convicted people who have already been convicted and are in prison right now. And the blue are state oil companies. So you have Petroecuador, that's Ecuador's state oil company. You have Pemex, that's Mexico's state oil company. You have PDVSA, that's Venezuela's state oil company. Nigeria, and Petrobras. I don't know what Petrobras is. I think that must be Petrobras. What's Petrobras? Brazil. So that's Brazil's oil company. All of them are connected to this scandal. Nobody in the MSM is talking about this. Nobody. Why? Well, I guess we'll find out. But I am interested to see what comes of this meeting that Trump is holding. I think it started an hour ago, purportedly. So we'll find out. My kids are screaming at each other upstairs, so I gotta pull out of here. But let's go ahead and hit a few rants, and I'll get up there before they kill each other. All right, so Gadget New. Oh, look at that. $10 given in BTC, in Bitcoin, tipped via the Rumble wallet. Thank you, Gadget. Appreciate you. Yeah, everyone, please hit the thumbs up. We have ZBN, $1. Truth hints why now the English are indoctrinated to believe the U.S. Revolution was simply an annoyance, and they let us win because the colonials wouldn't have stood a chance if the U.K. actually fought. Yeah. I mean, had they sent their entire military to the shores of America, then yeah, we probably would have lost. But they were spread thin. They were fighting all over the world. They were fighting in India. They were fighting in Africa. They were fighting even in Europe. There were battles in Europe that were happening, and because the British were spread so thin, many such cases throughout history, we took advantage of that, and it is what it is. But yeah, I wouldn't doubt that the British kids are indoctrinated to think that the American Revolution was just kind of a hiccup in our relations and not like a fundamentally transformative moment in human history. All right, if you're listening to this on replay, you can go to balancemedia.tv/boost and you can give a rant at any time. If you have any suggestions for the show, feedback, storylines you want me to look into, feel free to throw them in there, and I will. I'll add it to the show agenda. I think we are caught up as of now. But yeah, guys, hit the thumbs up, and I gotta go make sure my kids haven't killed one another. Let me get the music going. All right, so Tuesday we'll do a follow-up on Venezuela, like on this oil meeting that Trump is hosting. I suspect this is the oil industry coming back after many of them have been arrested by European authorities, and they're basically bending the knee to Trump, and they're going to go invest money in Venezuela, which they should have done. This is damages. And then we'll talk about Russia and Putin and the international order collapse that's absolutely happening. And it looks like Trump is scheduled the Colombian president, Gustavo Petro, to come visit the White House in early February. So we're going to talk about all that on Tuesday. But y'all have a great weekend, and we will see you later. I'll be on the narrative with Burning Bright Sunday night. And then tomorrow, we're actually launching on the Badlands Media Substack a new show called the Badlands Blitz. That'll be Burning Bright and me, as well as Ash. Burning Bright and I are doing the first episode. We recorded that this morning. So give a thumbs up, guys. We will see you later on. Good weekend.
Thank you so much for joining us, and don't forget to hit the thumbs up on this video. And a special thank you to all of our advertising partners. Please remember to shift your dollars to support those businesses that support Badlands Media.